because this is a contemplative post-human event. And so for many of you here, one of these words has some resonance. And for some, neither of them have much. They may have resonance, but you don't know what they are. So both of these terms are rather esoteric terms and rather new terms. People have a sense of what they mean, but those who use these terms also really don't know what they mean, because we are in the process of giving them shape. Contemplative studies is a relatively new discipline. So people often think contemplative studies, what is it about? Is it about contemplative traditions and practices, reading books, splitting hairs about the meanings of things, going back to the hermeneutics of those who actually composed these texts, trying to understand what they thought? Or is it about navel gazing, contemplative studies as a method, trying to contemplate about reality? Well, to some extent, it's both. But it's also, in some ways, a post-human discipline. So then we come to the other term. What does it mean? What does it mean? What is post-human? And so there again, there's a lot of confusion. Some people think, well, maybe post-human are some of these people who are trying to upload their consciousness into machines. And some people think that, well, it's about somehow running away from being human. But posthumanism, there is a posthumanism and there is also a post-human. Posthumanism is really related to our understanding of what we take ourselves to be today as human beings. As human beings, we are living a certain definition of the human that has been given to us, that we've accepted, whether we had a choice in it or not. To those who compose this term, what does it mean to be human? If we go back to the beginning of the modern period, we think about the Renaissance in Italy being an age of humanism. And we say that because there is a turning to that which in Greece, even way back, was a centering of consciousness in the human being. But there is a definition of the human that goes with it. It comes gradually, it's more amorphous, but it becomes the definition that, in a sense, Aristotle gave to the human, which is the rational animal. He actually said the animal with logos. So the animal with logos. And gradually, this notion of the animal with logos becomes the idea of a mind which occupies a body. Two different things. And the whole modern age is a systematic deployment of this definition. This is what's different. It isn't that we didn't take ourselves as mental beings in other cultures across the world in other times to some extent. But life flowed without any systematic or methodical idea of self-definition. The modern, which starts from the Enlightenment in Europe, is a distribution across the world of this idea of a mental being that methodically turns its mind upon itself and upon its world to make the best of it. Maybe that's the good way of putting it. The not so good way of putting it is to colonize it, to colonize our bodies, to colonize our activities, to colonize our life world, to colonize other cultures, other people, nature, animals, whatever. And that has brought us to our present point in the world. And in this world in which we find ourselves, we have come to a brink. We have come to a kind of dead end. And the dead end is, we try to patch it up because all around us, big cracks are opening. We find pandemics, we find climate crisis, we find cultural dystopia all around us. We find right-wing governments, fundamentalisms all around us. And all this is really something that we try to forget. We think it's happening to somebody else. It's happening far away from us. But the doors come closer and closer. The walls that shut us out become porous. The walls collapse in many cases all around us. And we wonder if little more technology can help us or whether we need something else. Posthumanism challenges the idea of humanism, which is based on a definition of the human that privileges the cogito or the mental ego above everything else. It is the definition of a kind of subject that needs an object to exist. And so, if we are to find solutions, post-humanist solutions are looking for an out of this particular prison in which we have folded our own self-definitions. And where are we to find that? So when we say that there is a certain kind of privileging of the cogito, it isn't like saying that we have to become infra-rational. That's happening a lot around us as well. From the same idea of people who feel that rationality has too much of us, and we have really destroyed our world due to our rationality. We have to find other ways of existing, and we have to find other ways of using the mind. The mind is not who we are. The mind is one of the things that we are. And so we come back to Asian contemplative and transcultural studies. And Asian contemplative studies, so far, there used to be departments of Asian studies, contemplative studies, and things like that. From about the end of the 1960s, they have been looked upon more and more with suspicion. And that is because today, this notion of colonialism has entered into our understanding of all these disciplines. Edward Said is a writer who wrote a book called Orientalism. And after that, all our understanding of what is Asian studies, etc., is infected by the notion of Orientalism. Orientalism does a number of things. Firstly, when we think about Asian contemplative studies, it often makes us think about the same kind of divide that we talked about with regard to mind and body, or mind and life, mind and animal, the human and the natural world. What it makes us do is think about a certain kind of divide between matter and spirit. Orientalism makes us aware of the fact that the West tries, in that sense, to stereotype the East in terms of a spiritual culture. Materialism and spiritualism become, or spirituality, of course, spiritualism is a slightly different thing, become a binary, just like mind and body become a binary. On the other, so all these schools, they start trying to shy away from looking at this whole area of spiritual life. And the academy, if it is to deal with Eastern studies at all, or any other cultural, what are called area studies, it either studies it as a sociology or an anthropology. Religion itself becomes an anthropological study. It's happening to somebody else out there. So it's happening to a specimen. In a way, it's a continuation of that whole idea of the subject-object split. We are going to look at these people. It doesn't happen to me. It happens to somebody else, and we're just studying them. Why are we studying them? Again, it becomes a colonizing effort. There is the understanding that by studying others, by studying them, we understand them better. Why do we want to understand them? Do we want to do something with them? Or is it my own understanding of the world that is changing from that? So these are the reasons why these studies, area studies, have been put aside to a large extent. They have either become part of our sociological and political understanding of the world, or if they're religious studies, then they become esoteric, studies of somebody else with the attempt, it's an armchair philosophy, an armchair scholarship. However, coming back to our notion of humanism, the reason why contemplative studies as a field has begun is really to challenge this very notion. Contemplative studies, again, just like posthumanism, it's difficult to define because, again, it's easy to misunderstand. Contemplative, you often think it is, well, maybe it's a going back to the monastic traditions of the past. But if it is the monastic traditions, again, monastic traditions are defined in distinction from life in general. It's happening in the monastery. It's also contemplative studies, you think it's all about meditation. Well, that's not the case. And that's partly the reason why this particular program is called Asian Contemplative and Transcultural Studies with the acronym of ACTS, ACTS. Acts are about actions. Anything you do, from walking to running to dancing to singing, can be a contemplative study. And it's so because you put another kind of attention to it. So this is the reason why this distinction of meditative space as a space of inaction and the space of dynamic action or activity are put together in this notion of Asian contemplative and transcultural studies, following the saying of the Gita that he is a true yogi who knows action in inaction and inaction in action. This is also a Taoist saying, to know that all your action is simultaneously an inaction. And in your stillness, an action proceeds. So to bring us into states like that, to bring us into experiences of that kind, that is the aim of contemplative studies, Asian contemplative and transcultural studies. The Asian contemplative studies aspect of it is to look at Asian practices as toolbox of practices which can give us ways by which we can experience an overcoming of the divide that between subject and object that we've created for ourselves. At the same time, it isn't about reliving the past, where again it connects with the post-human, is that we are in a world today in which we find ourselves with problems of our times. And these problems are at every level that we've othered from ourselves as human beings. These problems exist at the level of the earth, the geosphere, then the level of the life force and all the living creatures of the earth, the biosphere, the level of culture, the cultural sphere, the level of politics. At every one of these levels, we've created an other or others. And we are trying to find a way by which we can overcome this othering. Asian contemplative studies, in applying itself to these problems, becomes relevant to our times. And that's the way in which the transcultural aspect of it comes into existence. That it is really not just about studying the past for the sake of the past. It's not even the studying of the past for reliving those experiences of the past. It's for finding ways by which these experiences can become relevant to the problems of our time. So that is really what we are trying to do through this program, through this concentration. And, you know, there are many ways in which we can look at it, many ways which we can, you know, contemplate it. And so this event today was an opportunity for me to say a few words about this, to hear your views, take your questions, and also to engage in some practical aspect of a post-human contemplative practice. And for that, we actually started with some of that, with what Judy presented, but we will also go on after we listen to what you have to say, any questions that you may have, or what the audience may have, to a post-human dialogue, contemplative dialogue, a dialogue which is a meditation in the sense that dialogues of the past were philosophical exercises conducted in contemplation between me and Francesca, which will be followed by a contemplative meditation continued with music, and then a musical piece of contemplation following along those themes, and then some comments again offered in a spirit of contemplation from all of you. We have wonderful, deep thinkers, scholars present over here. We have people from the Posthuman Network, Yunus and Mafe, and we have Neela, we have many others over here, Jack, and I would look forward to hearing all your views, Maitreyi, Julian, whoever else, other people over here, regarding your thoughts, and whatever you would like to comment on regarding this event at the end of this period. So I think we'll start with any questions that you may have about this field, or if there's anybody from the audience that's watching in that may have any questions, and then I'll invite Francesca to join me over here. Yes, please.
In university, is under certain like the political science and the philosophy. How do you have it?
Yeah, so this is the department is called East-West Psychology. So just like the names that you just heard, contemplative studies and posthumanism, it's equally amorphous. This department was started way back when this institute, which is also equally amorphous, you can see the symbol back there, which has become a bone of contention right now. It's called the Sri Yantra, which is the symbol of our university. But East-West Psychology was started as a discipline by the founder of this school, with the aim that whatever we call psychology in the West has some assumptions that are not necessarily shared by others. So the question is, how do we look at different psychological ways of understanding who we are and bring them into dialogue? How do we find a place for them in a dialogue that doesn't necessarily accept anyone as the final word, as the dogmatic whole? So that's the umbrella under which Asian contemplative and transcultural studies exists.
There a practice you can do that you've learned through your study that can make you a better person?
Yeah, so this question about a better person, this is a very good question. A better person, what is a better person? A better person, you might think, is a person that is ethical in a deep sense. Ethical can be understood as a kind of a morality that's imposed from the outside. That is ethical. You see, if you look at it from the Kantian point of view, the point of view of practical reason, ethical means even without knowing it, I might be stepping on your toes. And sometimes knowing it full well, I might be stepping on your toes because it gives me an advantage to step on your toes. But how can I not do that? So, I mean, the notion of ethical and moral is, let's create a set of principles that we live by. So if we live by all those principles, then we are better people. But there's another way of understanding this same thing, but without that set of principles given for us to think about and practice. That is, can I experience closeness or unity with you? Can I really understand you? If I can understand you, if I can find relational identity with you, or even relational intimacy with you, I will not hurt you. That is a better person. A better person is a better person because they can extend their sense of intimate closeness to others. And those others are others, not just that one took for granted, but the others that one finds difficult to consider one's own. See? So that's exactly where these practices that you're talking about, that Asian contemplative and transcultural studies tries to open up, is about an ethics of belonging, an ethics of becoming. You become those things that you think you're not. To apply your consciousness to becoming that, that is where you can become a better person. And I'd say, yes, this is what this discipline is about. Yes.
And then how does that differ from empathy?
It doesn't differ from empathy. Empathy is an aspect. Empathy is a natural action of consciousness that we have. So empathy is an aspect of what we are talking about, but it is one aspect. Just like when we are talking about Asian contemplative and transcultural studies, you think about the chakra system, for example. And what that means is that there is intelligence at many different levels of our existence. And can we tap into those forms of intelligence? Empathy is one of those forms of intelligence. To open fully up to that is a kind of intuition. That intuition of closeness that ultimately is arising out of an identity is more available to us through empathy than through thinking. So yes, it isn't different from, it includes empathy in its scope. Yes.
Could you say a little bit more about the word posthumanism? Is it like transcendence or?
Yeah, post and posthumanism can actually mean both things. So when we are saying posthumanism, we are saying humanism has got a certain history, and it has got a certain boundary, because that boundary is the boundary of the definition of the human that this particular history carries. So posthumanism from that point of view is saying we want to go beyond that boundary. See, so from a chronological sense, it's like saying we want to start a new time, post outside of this time that we've considered ourselves to be the human of humanism. See? But post-human can have another sense, and that is that a Nietzschean sense, a sense in which the human is never fully defined. We do not accept any definition to be a final definition of the human. The human is a self-exceeding. So can we move to become a structure that is dynamic rather than a something that constantly tries to define itself against conditions that it can measure itself by? Marianne.
So you just say that the core of these studies has something to do with autoethnography or self-inquiry as a core, because it seems to me that that would be the only one of the ways of breaking the divide.
So certainly new methodologies like autoethnography or autohermeneutics, these are kind of methodologies we used in post-human studies or as well as in Asian contemplative studies. So one of the ways in which contemplative studies differs from general academic studies is that it promotes first-person accounts. So as you know, I mean, even those who study psychology in an academic sense, they have to follow the APA, American Psychological Association's standards, in which you're not allowed to speak in the first person. It's always happening to somebody else. You have to become the subject that impersonalizes your work. Now, there is something to be said about that, because the third person way of looking at things is a way of actually devoiding yourself of prejudice. But at the same time, it isn't happening to somebody else, it's happening to you. So contemplative studies encourages weaving the first person and the third person. So autoethnography is one of the areas. Autoethnography is treating yourself as a cultural subject. In other words, you are talking about yourself, but you're talking about yourself as belonging to a cultural history and to relations among cultures, how they're occurring through your own life. But there are other kinds of autophenomenology where you're studying yourself that may or may not have anything to do with your cultural location. I think all these forms of address are included in this kind of contemplative studies.
So initially you said about the organization of body by the mind. So that part, how you address in these studies?
Yeah, absolutely. So firstly, this entire, a lot of awareness is developing around that fact, this fact of the mind-body split, the Cartesian split, as it has been called. So firstly, this entire area as an area of address, scholarly address, has become very important in our times. And people have different ideas about it. What does it mean? See, and so if we look at, say, other models of the psyche, just as I was mentioning, the tantric model of the psyche, where we have the chakra system, we have different centers of consciousness, and each one of them has its own kind of consciousness, its own intelligence. The body has its own intelligence. So just like what Judy was doing, or what Jonathan will do as a musician, or Judy was doing as a asana practitioner, it really is to awaken the fact of the body's own consciousness. So we could say the mind is in the body, just as the body is in the mind. The mind is embodied. You see, so if we look at it from that point of view, we can actually see the mind-body relation not as a split, but both as an identity and as a dialogue. This notion of identity and dialogue at the same time is very important both in contemplative studies and in posthumanism. Because one of the founding notions in Asian contemplative studies is that of a relational monism. Everything is one. There is a plane of immanence. There is one reality. And everything is unique. Everything has been folded in a very special and unique way so that it doesn't identify with anything else. But it is the one thing that has folded itself. And in relation, you can find that interface between the one and the unique. And that's what these studies are about. Can we do that? Can we find nearness to that? I would say that. What three?
I very much related to the things you were talking about, the division and the split. But I'm struggling with posthumanism and becoming, partly because I'm new to that concept. But where I'm struggling is that, the notion of being human or being that we have the innate capacity to find our own selves, that fullness and meaningful connection with each other and the natural world. And so why is there a need to be post-human as opposed to finding ways to let go of all those external conditioning that prevents us from being human or being? So why not celebrate, find that is already within us and between us? So why post and why becoming as opposed to being human and being?
Yeah, so as I said right in the beginning, that there's two different things. There's posthumanism and there's posthuman. And posthumanism is not, as you see, like, for example, if you go to other cultures, you'll find that their understanding of what it means to be human may not be the same across the board. If you go to other times, you find that people had other ways in which they thought of themselves as human. So when we use the word posthumanism, it's a construct that we are talking about. But constructs are also real. You see, the construct of what it means to be human, that humanism generated, is something that we have been made to accept, whether we understand it or not. And so when we are talking about posthumanism, we are saying that we want out of that construct. So that is one. Now, the other thing that you said about the becoming, which is really about the post-human, that is saying that at any time, as you say, if we manage to, or if we can get rid of the constructs by which we define ourselves and be just who we are, who are we? This becomes the question. And the question is related to, are we something that we can take as static? Or are we something that has a power that is driving us into other forms of identity? And you may, that's why I said we started with posthumanism. That's why I said it's not the same. The idea of the posthuman as a structure that is constantly changing is not necessarily something that everybody has to buy. At least that's what I feel. But if you don't buy it, that's okay. But I think to be rid of the notion that there is a construct that of the subject and the object that divides itself, of othering, that is really a erasure of the definition of the human, not of the human.
It's more of a decision that either you change the narrative of what being human is.
Yeah.
Choose a different phrase.
Yes.
So that it's easier to kind of, not try to change concepts.
Yes. Yes. Right. Neela.
Thank you so much. I was just thinking the being and becoming thing. So from that, it seems to me that since you began with ethics as first philosophy, the Levinas's challenge,
Yeah.
philosophy of being,
Yeah.
which is always the self, self-enclosed.
Yeah.
It is always this philosopher,
Yeah.
splendid isolation of the philosopher sitting in a cave
Yeah.
or whatever. So in this dialogical mode, I think this is where the being and becoming dialogue is taking place.
Yes.
So I was wondering if this is connected with this, because after all, Levinas's challenge,
Yes.
even in a racial sense.
Yes.
So most intimate other of the West.
Yes.
Like the Jew is asking,
Yes,
thou
yes.
shalt not kill.
Yes. Yes.
And or the face of the other.
Yes.
That's his most important thing. Levinas talks about
Yes.
the face of the other,
Yes.
which challenges the self.
Yes.
So I would like your philosophy.
Yeah, no, you are absolutely right. What is happening is that the notion of the other that challenges the self must always exist, because in a way, as I said, that everything is unique. We are faced against the shock of the other, whatever we actually encounter. But underneath that shock of the other, there is, which is not there in the entire Kantian tradition, there is the sense that we cannot go beyond that. We can only use ethics to come close to that. But in the Indian tradition or in the Asian contemplative tradition, there is an assumption that we can go beyond that we are face to face with the shock of the other, but the other is the infinity of the one. The one is one and infinite at the same time. And we can experience that paradox in ourselves. That, in a sense, is posthuman, is a post-human experience. Yes.
I was thinking, if you could elaborate on the universalization into different ways. One is the othering and abstraction and generalization versus contemplation and individualization and, psychic universalization. So these, I'm just thinking, since you named it as contemplative, whether that method is important for that universalization aspect.
Yeah, I think what you're asking actually, again, brings back that question of posthumanism and the post-human, you see. So if we are actually taking the human to be a structure of cosmogenesis, in other words, the cosmos is becoming through us, see, then in a way, there is a natural drive towards universalization that is going on in us. It's going on everywhere. It's going on in everything. We don't have a privilege over anything else in that cosmogenesis that's going on. But there is an intensification of consciousness that has taken place, a certain freedom that has taken place. And that freedom can be best utilized in putting one's attention to it. See, and that's where what we are calling yoga, which is one word for it. And also it's a contested word. What is yoga? Just as we saw, today yoga means something over here. If we go back in India, we find there are umpteen definitions of the word yoga. But we are giving it a certain definition, whatever we may call it. It's, if we think of it as a way by which we are putting our attention to the way in which the cosmos is becoming in itself an individual. Cosmogenesis is, in a sense, the individuation of the cosmos in the individual. So then that becomes the kind of direction in which contemplative studies can become close to posthumanism.
So in other words, I was thinking like, more we generalize, we kind of other the cosmos more.
Yeah.
More we contemplate, that we become the other.
Yes. Yes. So instead of generalizing, we can also see generalizing has to do with abstraction. See, that's where again the mind-body split is happening. We are creating classifications. It's related to what Heidegger called the distinction between calculative and meditative reason. Reason itself can go both ways. We are utilizing it in an instrumental sense, or we can turn back and become connected with the being that is becoming, not just my being, you see, but the being.
What are the texts that we study in this program?
Oh, so there's a lot of variety in that, and there's choice in that. So it's basically, it's the Eastern traditions, and, you know, there's no specific text that, because I mean, these are graduate studies, so there's choice in that. So we'll have to look at that in greater detail when you know, you and I can talk about it. I think I'll invite Francesca to come and join me here.
Debashish, can we get a big gong?
Yes.
We love this before, we're just like
Yes.
getting the vibration. All right. Are you ready to follow?
You initiate us.
All right, let's do it. It's really
Not too loud.
not too loud. Okay. All right, stop. Okay, countdown.
Here's her phone.
You ready?
Yes.
I need it in my classroom. It's powerful. Wow. Wow, Debashish. So we've been working together for 10 years, but this is the first time we meet in person, in the physical,
Yes.
embodied, fleshy, biological. And it's amazing. Thank you so much, Julian and Wendy, for offering this amazing space. And Aurobindo, Aurobi, Lamer, and the trees, the rivers, and Yunus and Jonathan, and Jayashri, Stephanie, Carolina, like your amazing Judy, beautiful work, and Mafe with the poetic machine, and everyone, and Abudi, Sabine, everyone, Meltem. Wow, yeah. So, should we go into a real contemplative dialogue
Yes.
in which we ask question,
Yes.
any question,
Yes.
and we just give answers, and then the other person.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Can you start?
Yes, please, please, Francesca.
All right. Who are we?
In a sense, it is best to leave this as a question for each of us. Because that's really the question that we are carrying with us, is it not, Francesca? Maybe that's the question of the cosmos. The cosmos is perhaps asking that question of us. And to ask that question, to start by asking that question, is really an initiation, I'd say, is it not, Francesca? How would you answer such a question?
Well, I'm cheating because I have just finished the second book, and the question is, who are we? So I'm cheating, and it's just repeating. I just will check yesterday the chapter.
Oh, that's, yes, sure.
But it would come out of me to say, you know, that if you go to the absolute,
Yes.
that we are everything.
Yes.
If we go to the level of the manifestation, that we are flows, that we are rivers, that we are energies, that we are not individuals. And that I think is the illusion and is the dream. And I like that in shamanistic societies, in some shamanistic societies, the awakened state is considered the dream, because we often get trapped in the idea of being separated. But when we go into the dream state, everything is liquid, is truly poetic. It's almost like the fabric of existence. And in my dream, if I am a skilled dreamer, I can really work with that, and I can be anything. I don't have to be Francesca. I could be Debashish, I could be this building, I could be everything and nothing. So if we go to that level of comprehension, then, and we were having this amazing chat during our lunch, we are everything. But of course, being everything also means that you need to be also non-being, because that's the potential from where the dimension and from where manifestation can spark. So, and it really goes beyond ethics, beyond good and evil. And so your question before, like, is this going to make us a better people? I like your answer. Well, it depends what does it mean to be better. If better means to understand who you are, then yes. If better means to be morally good, then no, because what is morally good according to you, it might be different from what it is according to me. I might be vegan, or I might be pescatarian, and so for me, what is good to me might be different from other people. But of course, we were having this really interesting discussion during some amazing food that Wendy made before. And the question came of, so what if everyone got enlightened? And of course, what does it mean to be enlightened? But to know who you really are at that level of being everything. And so one possibility is that it doesn't happen often, because it is almost a technology of survival. If everyone understood that we are everything, the cycle is finished. There is, like, you know, the destruction after creation. But if we are still in the cycle of creation, then you don't want to have this dimensional awareness, or the cycle itself ends. So I never thought of that in the terms. I was like, oh, this is very interesting. Maybe that's why you never have too many people aware at the same time, historically speaking. You always have some people, and other people are caught in Maya, are caught in the repetition of habits and disruption and attachments. But some people always get it. It's like, oh, wait a second, let's stop and pause. So I think that we are always everything, and we can do this experiment right now. Just, you know, if you go beyond the eyes and the face and the wall and the bashish, and now it's like going all this way, you realize that there is real no separation. It's everything. But then if you keep going, then you go to the planet, and then you go to the solar system, and then you go to the universe, and then we realize that the universe is expanding towards what? So it's really, there is no ending. So I think if we want to play the cosmic game, then we cannot be fully aware. Otherwise, the cosmic game ends. Like if you know that you're playing a game, you're not playing the game anymore. You're not in the game. So it's interesting. I never thought of it, but maybe it's almost evolutionary, you know, the dimensional itself, realizing that if you want to be a dimension, then you cannot have too many beings that are part of you aware of that. Otherwise, the game itself dissolves.
So Francesca, let's consider another possibility. And that is that just as in a way, it's kind of, there is no real hard distinction between the human and the animal, right? So now, like, for example, Radha over there is meditating, right? And Radha is understanding what we are saying in Radha's way, right? So in a sense, we may say that there is another level at which we are understanding it through language, etc., which is not necessarily the same way in which Radha is understanding it. And Radha's understanding is reaching a certain kind of reality. But we have, as a species, entered another kind of reality of understanding. Now, what you're calling enlightenment, maybe that is a sporadic experience by some people of this reality of what you said. When you said, who are we, right? It's asking the mind to engage with this possibility that we are everything. And you gave a good example, because you said when we dream, we can become everything. So in those states of dream, we actually multiply ourselves. We lose the boundaries of who we are. when we come into waking. So waking is just as the Upanishad says, waking, dreaming, dreamless sleep, and the fourth state, these are just different conditions of existence. So when we come into that experience, when we think about it, that's available to all of us. But to become that, actually, to experience that, to know that, it takes what you're calling enlightenment. That is the state of enlightenment. Now, how about the possibility that that state of enlightenment is just another layer of consciousness, just like that's not totally separate from who we are, but there is a certain kind of a porosity between us and that state of consciousness. That's why we may imagine it. But maybe there is another species that to which all beings of that species are naturalized in that consciousness. Just like we have a certain operation of cognition to which human beings are naturalized, that Radha is not yet naturalized. So can there be perhaps another organ, faculty that may be evolved to which this knowledge of who we are is natural? And out of that natural, experience, other kinds of activities and life flow that we don't know what they are, because we assume this kind of human to be the one that lives.
That's a wonderful question. Yeah, so I like it, again, going back to shamanistic traditions.
Yeah.
I like the idea that in shamanistic traditions, everything is a culture. So if you go to, for instance, to the Western canon, the idea of the human is that species, which is specifically defined by the evolution of culture. So is that being who create cultures, through music, through language, through dance, through science, through whatever you want. And then other beings do not have a culture, but they have a nature. Now, if you go into shamanistic societies, it kind of goes the other way, and of course are compatible with each other, in the idea that everything has a culture. So it, for instance, the human itself is not a species, but is the location of the subject. And the subject is not in separation from the object, but it is the one who is in that moment embodying the perspective. So right now, for instance, I can see this room from this perspective, and I see the light over there that the people who are sitting in that location looking towards us cannot see. Of course, you can see in other ways, but you know what I mean with the eyes. So the question is, there are, we often, that's the problem of human centricism, which is, I think, one of the power and the gifts of posthumanism. And I like that, some people were asking, do we really need posthumanism? It's, I think that we need it to be free from the burden of ancient understanding of the human, in which the human is in an absolute separation from other species, is in charge, is the master of evolution, is the masterpiece of evolution, is the creatures that was made in the image of God. When if you believe in God, then you should understand that God is everywhere and everything. And if God is God, God should have no preference, because God should be all-encompassing. Yeah. So God should not have the preferred species, otherwise he's not God. Maybe he's a God, but he's not the all-encompassing divine self. So in that sense, I think that one of the gifts of posthumanism in the 21st century, there are many there which we can mention, but one of them is really understanding that we not only don't need human centricism anymore, but it's actually killing us. I think that, we are in the, there was a comment on Facebook. By the way, we say hi to all our Facebook friends, because we're people that are connecting from many countries. And one comment was, can you have posthumanism and Asian contemplative studies in the era of the Anthropocene? Well, I would say absolutely. That's what we need in the era of the Anthropocene, because it's exactly in the era of the Anthropocene where we understand that human centricism is actually killing us. At the moment, number one risk of extinction for humans is human actions. For instance, pollutions. For instance, biodegradation. For instance, 6 mass extinction. So I would say, going back to your question, posthumanism really allows us to get out of the pedestal, where we again are not the champions. We don't need to be the champions. We are coexisting in a big flow of this dimensional revealing. And in that sense, Radha, what is Radha doing right now? Is she understanding what we're saying? You know, we all often think of consciousness in human specific ways. For instance, through the mind. For instance, to the psyche. For instance, through language. And these are all connected to the brain, which is a specific, uniquely evolutionary trait of the human. Now, if you are part of this dimension, you are sharing as being part of the ocean, and every species has developed specific traits and characteristics. So if I find myself with Radha in the forest and there is no food, she's going to do much better than I do, because I don't no longer know how to survive unless I really train myself. So I would say that, and I'm going to push it, and you know, some of you may not agree with this, but I would say that awareness is a condition sine qua non, which means you have to have this to exist. It's almost like once you exist, you have that. It's part of being here. It doesn't matter if you are a human or a rock or a carpet or Radha, or doesn't matter. But then the way you perceive that and the way you phrase that, it relates to your embodiment. So in that sense, it's almost like the awareness is there. But now if I try to express this to Radha in human ways, we are not going to be understanding each other. But we can meet each other in other ways. And I want to say one more thing, and then I want to ask you a question. I used to think that, you know, I have a lot of transhumanist friends. I'm not a transhumanist, but a lot of transhumanists really want to change the human species. Even the body of the human species must be changed, according to a lot of transhumanists. A lot of transhumanists want to live a radical long life, like thousands of years. I'm not joking. It's the idea of, like, used to be called immortality, now it's called radical life extension. A lot of them are into cryonics. They don't want to die. They're not going to die. They're going to be frozen. Hopefully they will be revitalized in the future. It's interesting. I'm not a transhumanist, but I must say it is interesting. Now, some of them would say, you know, like, what would you like? How would you change your body? And I always thought, like, I'm pretty good with my body. I don't need anything. Until a transhumanist friend of mine told me, what about wings? And of course, I would love to fly. So I said, okay, wings. Stuff to say no. So for some years, I say, okay, I would enjoy wings. So I can say that, you know, to really redesigning the human, to CRISPR and all this stuff. The wings, I might be interested. Until I moved to Newport. I used to be in New York City. I moved to Newport. And I started to see a lot of birds, for real, not just on the screen, like real birds. And I started to see them in their lives. And they get tired, so they fly out and then they have to rest. They fight with each other. They're scared, so big birds go and prey on small birds. One day, I woke up from this cry of these birds. What I saw was the big birds that took the eggs of another bird, and the small birds were in panicking and crying. So I was like, okay, they're not so different. I mean, they have wings, but they get tired. They're distressed. So after seeing how a bird lives, I was like, I don't need wings. I already have my wings. So I would say that, you know, this idea of the species, I think that the posthuman really gave us the gift of no longer in need to be anthropocentric. And when I say anthropocentric, is not just the Western canon. There are, even the notion of reincarnation in many Indian traditions, that if you're a human, you're in a good spot, you know, like it means that you did something good. You know, so I'd say that human centrism is not just a specific tradition. And talking of that, I would like to ask you a little more about Asian contemplative studies and posthumanism. And I would like to ask about the notion of, this all-encompassing spirit. And how do you bring technology into this conversation? Because I find a lot of similarities and with many different traditions. But because the way we have developed our society being at the moment very technocentric, the discussion that we're having about technology now is not the same that people had 2,000 years ago. So how is technology in relation to this all-encompassing spirit from an Asian contemplative perspective?
Yeah, thank you, Francesca. Firstly, I'd like to say also about the notion of coexistence that you brought in. then I think there also we have to think about the human in terms of whether the human is a fixed structure or not. It's not just about wings, which is a capacity, but it's about awareness. And so the question, when we're talking about Asian contemplative studies, the question of whether my awareness remains what it is or whether it changes, or whether it is a conditioning. It is a conditioning largely, but also what we take ourselves to be is a certain kind of a limitation of awareness. So awareness that is given, the awareness that we come with, is an awareness that is constantly being stretched. And can we use certain methods to change that in an accelerated way? Can I communicate with Radha, right? Not mentally, not forcing Radha to understand my mental symbols, but in the way in which Radha experiences. I believe it's possible. And that's what the contemplative studies, the schools of yoga are giving us. Not that those people were always trying to do that. They didn't develop their methods, technologies, I'd say, technologies of consciousness with the aim of understanding Radha, right? They did it with the aim of immortality, maybe, or other kinds of things. But when we're talking about posthumanism, I think, just as you're saying, the kind of necessity for getting out of the anthropocentric, this is one way by which we get out of the anthropocentric, that it is important for us to extend not our lives, but extend our awareness to other forms of awareness where true communication can take place. Just like the question about ethics. It isn't just finding some kind of ways by which we stay away from each other or don't impact each other, but can we truly understand each other? Even human beings, we don't understand each other. We understand constructs. Can we, and somebody raised the question of empathy. What is the difference between empathy? Empathy, that's the reason why many, humanists who are not humanists in the strict sense, have gone towards empathy as a way by which we can understand better than, humanists who take ourselves to be the rational cogito. So that is one thing. I think the extension of awareness is something which posthumanism can bring to Asian contemplative studies as a desired goal, of our times. Was there another part to your question?
Yeah, and also what do you think like technology?
Yeah.
Technology aware.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That really important question, I think. So technology, I mean, as we call it, that's why I use the term. Of course, people like Heidegger in his major essay on technology, the question concerning technology, and Foucault, when he's talking about technologies of the self, they're trying to revise the notion of technology. They're trying to bring it out of its, sort of, projection from the mind to technologies that are related to other forms of existence. But even if we take that, what we normally think of as technology, which is a machinic system, a machinic method that has turned into an artifact. If we think of that, then I'd say that has its own kind of life that can belong to other forms of awareness. So you see that there's something new and unpredictable that happens when we produce something. It belongs to a certain stratum of our existence, but at the same time, it can lend itself to other strata of existence. So it becomes living in another way. See, ghosts can inhabit the machine, in other words. So I think we cannot take it to be something which we have produced, and therefore it is just that particular type of production of human rationality. That's how I would. It becomes part of universal existence that has certain boundaries to its own existing, but that can easily lend itself to other forms of awareness.
How can we reach Debashish? Should we ask Mafe to maybe to introduce a little bit
Yes.
the project? Because Mafe works with aware technology.
Yes,
And
also to answer this question that you just raised.
Mafe is also co-director of the Global Posthuman Network. She's an amazing artist. She's done a lot of shows at the Queen's Museum in New York City and many others. And she's actually doing the post-poetic machine right now.
Yes,
You're all part of that.
yes.
Well, yes, this machine is recent and it's experimental. So what I'm trying to do is to register in real time the resonance of sound. So our voices, music, even the steps that we do in the wood, very like nuances of vibration in the space gets registered by the machine and produces this image that can show you a little bit, show us a little bit how radiance takes place in the space. So it's a reflection on how our voice, our tone, the way that we project our voices, the words that we use actually, and you're gonna see with the instrument also the different shapes. So it's really opening my mind, and I hope that open yours too, to see beyond the realms that our eyes and ears and human senses can reach.
So do the different colors mean different things?
Right now is, yes, is related to the volume. It's not in a particular meaningful way. It's not that red means something, but it's becoming more red as our voices or tones or vibrations are higher. So yes, that's the language. Yeah, and well, in general, my work is about energy and the subtle body and how our presence, how can be aware of the presence of everything, exactly that you are, our presence in everything and everything in presence, basically.
So, Francesca, related to that, yeah, I see it.
Yeah, there you go. I see it's going to be good. I can see the lights.
No, so because you see, when we are talking about machines, one view is that machines are extensions of our organs, right? So our organs themselves, so they're the human being, even if we go to Asian traditions, we go to a particular philosophy called Sankhya. According to that, everything that we do is machinic. We are a machine. And yet awareness is either, you could say it is an essential part of that machine. It's intrinsic to the machine. We can kind of void the machine of awareness, or we can assume that it's always part of the machine. So this is, again, when we talk about the mind-body split, we are ignoring that. And partly the whole notion of maybe the musician who, when they play music, are experiencing a kind of a consciousness of that machine, which does not belong to the mind. Actually, when the music is being played, the musician is sometimes surprised by what they play, because the hands know what the mind doesn't know. So from that point of view, do you think the machine that we create, like the machine that Mafe is using, has that kind of consciousness that we have to accept on its own terms?
Thank you so much. It's a great question. And it also relates very much to what is called the AI takeover scenario, which being in the States, a lot of people are fascinated by the idea that in a very close future. We are not talking about far distant future. We are talking about a close future. AI, artificial intelligence, is going to take over. And I can say that it has already taken over. If you take a subway ride in New York City, you're going to see everyone on their screen. And these are data. You are pretty much, like a part of this big data project, of which Harari is talking about. We were mentioning Harari before in our conversation. I would say that going back to the question, how do you define consciousness and how do you define awareness? I like very much on this, the distinction that Maharaj, who was this very important non-dualistic Advaita Vedanta teacher. He was not a philosopher. He was not trained in philosophy. He was actually selling cigarettes. And he eventually had his own enlightenment through more like a specific Indian tradition of having a guru. And in his case, he makes this distinction. He wrote this book, by the way, which are all dialogues. He didn't write the book. It was all recorded dialogues we're doing now. And it's called I Am That. And I highly recommend to all of you. It's very beautiful. But he makes a distinction between awareness and consciousness, which I really like. And I think of consciousness as something that we all share, for instance, as a species, for instance, as a biosphere, for instance, as a technosphere, which I'm going to mention in a minute because it's very important to understand what it is, for instance, as a planet. And then you have the realm of awareness, which goes beyond that and includes non-existence, includes the infinite potential, includes all of that. And so he says, I am that. I'm not consciousness, I am awareness. I was never born, I will never die. I am existence and non-existence. So he said, I'm there, I'm at that level. So if we go to that level, that's when everything becomes the ocean, and everything, in order to be, has that spark. When we go to the level of consciousness, is what do you share and how do you share with others? So for instance, by being part of a species, we share what is called collective consciousness. And so, for instance, we may have similar dreams, we may have similar intuitions. For instance, it's interesting what's happening with the posthuman movement. There are, sparkling everywhere because there is this consciousness that is raising by being human in the 21st century, which is no longer being human, in the 2000 BC or anything, BCE or anything like that. So I would say that when we think of technology, I would say, of course, technology is aware because there is no way that you can take awareness of anything. On that level also, is technology conscious? So I would say, if you're thinking as human consciousness, I would say no, because it's very human-centric. It's almost when people would get to this country and they would get to Ellis Island and they would not speak English. So they would give them a test and they didn't pass the test because they didn't know how to read and write, but not in English. And they were sent back to their country saying, oh, you don't know how to read and write. But they did not know how to read and write English, but it's read and write Chinese or Italian or whatever. So I think that when we are, is technology aware? Of course, is aware. Is technology conscious? Of course, it's conscious in a technological sense. How, what does it mean to be embodied this way instead of this way? The body of this microphone, the way this microphone is going to be part of everything else, is different from my own body. And of this, I want to talk about the technosphere, which is a new concept. I think it's very interesting, at least in posthuman studies, is very interesting. So basically, we often think of the biosphere related to the planet. But the technosphere is everything human-made, including infrastructures, technology, that is going to stay here much longer than when we as a species are going to go extinct. So, in big, like macro chronological times, even once we are extinct, the technosphere is going to, survive us much longer than us. So, like technology that is not very good at recycling itself is going to be around much longer than the human. So in that sense, I think that it is a human-centric question when people ask, oh, is technology going to take over and is going to be them against us? Is dualistic? Is again the body-mind, where now we are the mind and this is the body that we are using, but in the next future, this is going to go the other way. Now this is going to be the mind. They say, oh, those humans, they're not very enlightened. They kill each other, they rape each other, they can be a pet maybe, just a nice human pet, giving some pasta or rice or whatever they like, but mostly, intelligent machines. So I think that, that one is the AI takeover scenario. And I think it is based on this dualism of, the master-slave relation. But again, as posthumanists, we have deconstructed that. I realize that I don't want to be part of any kind of dichotomy. I don't want to be the master and I don't want to be the slave. I don't want to do neither of that because both are toxic. So I think that in our relation with technology, technology is not an extension of ourselves, but it's part of us, part of everything. And in the book that I'm writing now, it's called the Art of Being Posthuman. And I use part as P in parentheses art. So when you're part of something, you also are the art of being that. And so technology is that. And we're also part of technology. So you can go the other way around. And so it's like, what kind of intention are you putting that there? I think someone before was mentioning, maybe Julian was mentioning, or Yunus, someone who was making computer games with intentions. So the idea is that it's not just a computer game. What is the intention behind the computer game? Can have that a moral? Can there be a teaching? Are we aware that we are creating the internet through our researches, through our data, to what we watch online, to the video that we post, the picture that we post? This is what we are doing now, is creating the internet right now, is creating the consciousness of the internet right now. So we are part of that consciousness that is forming, that of course is going to be influenced by the human, but it's not going to be human, and it's never going to be just human. So we say we are part of this, and technology is part of us. And in that sense, there is no AI takeover scenario, but if you are going to go into that scenario, then it has already happened. It is already there. So I think it is very interesting that posthumanism is, again, one of the gifts of posthumanism, is really bringing technology to the discussion, not as the enemy or not as God, because the risk of transhumanism is that technology becomes the God that died. With Nietzsche, God died, now you have Google. You don't need anymore God. It's done. Start with a G, but it's not God, it's Google. And so the posthumanism doesn't do that. We embrace technology as, like you say, maybe through Heidegger, as a way of revealing, or as Foucault, technology of the self, not as an object. No, we are not in separation of the subject. And so that's definitely another gift of posthumanism. And one for sure is, addressing anthropocentrism, and the other one is addressing technology in a non-dualistic way. And that is something that I see a lot of course, similarities to indigenous worldviews and Asian contemplative studies. But then the specific discussion on technology, which is very 21st century, I can see that posthumanism is really giving us the power and the tools to do that. And that's why I feel it's very relevant to understand who am I, because I cannot rely on what people understood 2000 years ago, because the planet was different. The trees were different. Even the trees, many of the trees around here come with the colonizer or the settlers or whatever. And these are beautiful trees. I'm not against them because they are not a native species, but they're not. So the planet itself was different. Now, can I just rely on what people understood 2000 years ago? No. Can I be inspired by them? Of course. So that's when I feel that it's our own responsibility, and it's our own poetic game, post-poetic machine, to be the ones who are going to say, who am I? How can I ask someone else, who am I?
Right.
And so we are now.
Thank you, Francesca.
Thank you.
Shall we move to the third part?
Yeah. Unless is there any question that is really like that, or should we go into the meditation? What do you think? Is if there is anything that is really like, I can't wait to to ask this, and then you're meditating but still thinking about the question, maybe we can ask the question. Otherwise, we go into meditation. Any question that is like, I see Yunus. Yeah, I can see that. Later? I don't know. Yeah. Are you sure? Yunus, go for it. I can see.
Yeah, time for discussion.
After.
After.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Absolutely.
All right.
Yeah.
For meditation, should we turn the lights down? And do you want to lay down? Don't fall asleep if you can. But we have coffee downstairs. Wendy made a delicious coffee already. So, I give us the little gong.
And then have Jonathan can.
Yeah.
You can say it. You can say it.
We're going to start create a little the atmosphere, so find your comfortable position. Gongs around. We are starting with a question. And I want you to observe yourself. See what comes to yourself. And the question is, who am I? So don't think, just immerse yourself in contemplation, embracing the question, who am I? And once you've embraced this question, you're going to open another question with full awareness. Who are we? So from who I am, who am I, you're going to open into who are we? Embrace whatever comes to you and don't judge anything, just embrace it. From who are we are going into what are we? And I want you to feel, to smell, to perceive all the sounds, the feelings, the texture of your clothes on yourself, your heart beating, the air coming through, in and out of yourself. All the embodiments, in and out, out and in, self-reflecting mirrors, who you are. All the people in this room, all the forest around us, all the lands and the oceans, all the planets and the cosmos, all the universes that are forming right now, and all the microorganisms inside of you as a multiverse that we are. And from here we're going to go into the last question. When and where are we? I want you to be fully in the present time. You as you are. We as we are. The planet as it is. The planet as it is. Who we are. With no judgment. And who can we be? Taking 1 to 2 minutes to now embracing the potential of who we can be as individuals, as societies, as a species, as a planet, and beyond. Playing the cosmic game. Who can we be?
We who know some of the others in this room, or think we know some of the others in this room, we who don't know some of the others in this room, some other humans, some other non-humans, we are them all. Those we think we know, we do not know. Those we think we do not know, we at some level intimately are. We must open ourselves to the awareness of those who are around us as both unknowable and known in an intimate sense. And from this, there arises a sight of deep relationality. a sight of infinity.
We are the infinite. We are the finite. We are our words, our gestures. We are our actions and reactions. We are our emails and photos. We are our food and air. We are what we are. We are what we think we are. We are here, right now. We are here, right now. Posthumans, transhumans, anti-humans, humans, pre-humans, non-humans. Who are we? There is no written script. We are the authors, the actors and the actresses, the electricians, the stage, the prompts, the audience, the script. We are the cosmic game. We are technology and ecology. We are the biosphere and the technosphere. We are intentional, and we will never, ever forget who we are. See? Wow. Wow. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jonathan. So we'd love to open it up for comments and reflections. Yunus, please. Thank you.
Yeah, and just for everyone, because we know some people know some others, but if you don't mind, we're going to go into the sharing circle. So if you don't mind, maybe saying your name. If you want, you can say something else about yourself. You don't have to, but just introduce yourself so that everyone knows who you are. And again, I want to thank Jonathan for this amazing, amazing meditative music. And thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Debashish, Francesca, Jonathan. I'm Yunus. I wrote with Francesca at NYU. Hopefully we'll keep working. So my questions are very general, but I do have specific questions maybe later. The first question is, or maybe something to reflect on. So posthumanism and all the related movements come as a response to humanism and humanism problems which emerge in Europe, in Renaissance, and of course modern subjectivity, right after like the Cartesian subjectivity. So then clearly we have lots of problems with this with today's technology. So then, I mean, how would we make this a challenge? I mean, you deal with this in your book, Francesca. How could posthumanism become a global international movement? Because it's the response to European events. So it's a little bit, I mean, humanism is Eurocentric or based in also Europe. So how could posthumanism be, posthumanism in India, but also Turkey as well. But we are kind of in the fringes of the West in a way. And of course, colonialism made a lot of things global. But isn't it, my question is, isn't posthumanism still a European movement mostly, rather than an international? I know many of us are internationalists, cosmopolitan, but yet it seems to be a European event. So how do we deal with this posthumanism and making it more international? That might have
Yes, Yunus, I think, just as we were discussing, posthumanism pluralizes the notion of the human. So I think, firstly, as you yourself said, the kind of modern period is a period not only of the construction of a human subject in Europe, but by colonization, it is really the construction of the global modern subject. In a way, today, you may say that the producers of this construct are living also many lives or many versions of the human, because they have their own past that continues to live in them. And so too, these other places that you're talking about, non-European spaces, where the subjects are also multiple subjects. They also have their own past. They have, uneven assimilation of the humanist identity. So I think posthumanism as a kind of a overarching, and I think that's one of the good, beautiful things about the global posthumanism project, that it has spawned off so many other national posthumanisms. And each one of these, it has its freedom to define itself by its own terms. I think that's the part where there's a posthumanism as an umbrella of emergence out of this global condition to a kind of a relational convergence, you may say, has to be encouraged from that point of view, that, each people with their own history, their own culture, their, own diversity have to talk about their own relationship with humanism. That becomes their posthumanism. But I think the overall umbrella of the posthuman or posthumanist is valid from that point of view of the globalization of this humanist condition today.
And can I also
Yes,
something,
please.
because that's a very important question that I know that also Carolina had a similar question to this when we're talking about posthumanism. So is posthumanism just a post-Western centric understanding of the human? I would say no. I would say that we often think of humanism, for instance, in relation to Renaissance humanism. There are many types of humanism. One, for instance, that come to my mind is Confucian humanism. Confucianism is a humanism. And of course, because of that, a lot of Taoist philosophers were criticizing Confucianism because being a humanism. Now, it is true that we often, that academia, is being nourished a lot by Western philosophy. So we often think of humanism as something that is, European. I would say that we can really trace this back to when the human become the human. And it's not just through the terminology, okay, of humanus come obviously from Latin, humanus, humana, humanum, which itself as a notion comes from anthropos, which is Greek. So that is the language, that we are using. And of course, if you are Chinese, it wouldn't make sense because the human actually in Chinese is a different character. It comes with completely different connotations. But if you think of the human as in separation from nature or using nature, we can really go back to the beginning of the extended era of the Anthropocene. So when we think of the Anthropocene, a lot of people think, by the way, the Anthropocene would be the new geological era, where now the human, the anthropos, is a geological dynamic, is a geological force. It's not just one species among many others. It comes, of course, out of anthropocentrism. Now, often, Kutz and Stormer, who came with the term, they said that, comes with really the Industrial Revolution, which is very much European again, and with the notion of the Enlightenment, European Enlightenment, not that Buddhist Enlightenment or Hindu Enlightenment. But other people say, but it's much older than that. It really comes with the beginning of the Holocene, with a switch from nomadic life to agricultural life, from nomadic life to sedentary life, when the human no longer had to be in harmony with nature, between it a common nature, because if you are nomadic and you live out of nature, you are part of nature. You understand, if you kill too many animals, you're going to die yourself. If you take too many plants, you're going to be starving because the plants cannot regenerate themselves enough for you to survive. So I think that the switch comes really with agricultural society. I'm not here to criticize his history, but I think it's not the problem of Renaissance humanism. I think the problem comes with the human think of themselves in separation from nature, when now nature becomes the standing reserve, as Heidegger would say, where we can take out of nature because we are not that. Now, nature becomes the object that we as the subject can master. So that problem is not just a European problem. And it's interesting because, a lot of shamanistic societies don't have it, but a lot of shamanistic societies are really still connected to nomadic way of living that are really 99% of our history as a species. So we as a species live 99% in the Paleolithic time, which we never studied, ever. We don't even study in the Neolithic time. We studied civilization between the commas, started with writing, which is only, 5,000 years, which is nothing in the history of humankind. And that's political. That's a political reason, because come with a mindset, come with wars, with slavery, with a lot of shifts in power. Now, I would say that the problem is not, it is true, you're right, that often humanism is taught as Renaissance humanism, but the problem is not Renaissance humanism. By the way, Renaissance humanism also saw the human as the divine spark, so the human became also the one that was also God. Pico della Mirandola, you are divine, being human, because you're a spark of God. So it's not just God separated from you as the creator to creature, but you creature are also creator, because you're divine as well. So also humanism, Renaissance humanism doesn't have to be just seen as, this, anthropocentric. But I would say that, so, it is true that at the moment, a lot of posthumanism have been done by decolonizing that aspect of history. And that's a problem. If we stay there, yes, then it's just Western, post-Western centric, who cares? I mean, that's already come from the 70s. So of course, we have to really delve into all the other notions of the humans that come from many other places. But I think the issue is not just humanism. The issue is anthropocentrism. And that is, it's a much longer history. And I really hope that we start to think of philosophy not just through civilization, because that is, again, it is the beginning of writing. And it's very problematic. Like if you think of Aboriginal Australians, they enter history when colonizers write about them. So until the 18th century, Aboriginal Australians are considered prehistorical, which is pretty insulting, is an insult. You are not part of history because you cannot write. It just, there are many other ways to archive knowledge. And a lot of knowledge has not been passed down to writing, oral history, dancing, plant knowledge, you name it. So I think that we really need to decolonize also the notion of writing as the essence of culture, essence of the mind, essence of, absolute understanding. So I think that is true what you're saying about now historically speaking of the post-human, but I don't think the issue is, like.
Yeah, I agree, but it's not clear in many of the posthumanist literature.
It's true.
It's that kind of broader definition of humanism that we're talking about as part of the civilizing process.
Yeah.
Not always clear.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I think from that point of view, there can be different humanisms that need to be addressed by post-humanism. Yeah, also though there is the overall notion of the global and the Anthropocene and its latest, I think the methodical construct, because I think that's what I've been, when I was talking about it, it's not that it didn't exist in other cultures, it did, but I think it was not so methodical. I think the modern is the methodical turn of this entire identity. Before that, it was much more fluid. And so you have, for example, many ideas of the human floating around in, say, kind of pre-modern India, of which general society has certain anthropocentric, traits, but they're not methodologically applied to human identity. But I think you're right. I think that's what needs to be addressed from the viewpoint of non-Western societies as well.
Thank you so much. Hello, my name is Debashish, and Francesca is one of my dearest friends, and her daughter and my daughter are friends, and I am also what you would call a spiritual educator, healer, and I wanted to share from everything that's being said because we always have the best conversations. I came to support Bhakti Bandhav, which is an ashram of Bhakti Yoga in the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition in Ferrando. And so, we practice, who we are, who I am, I'm a jiva, right? I'm a soul. I'm part and parcel of divinity. I'm relating with the material energy all the time. And this conversation is a divine dance because, especially also at Dr. Bund, the reason I left Massachusetts and came here was because it was the 2 ways, this is considered the Vajra belt. By the way, this is such a beautiful thing. I'm honored to be here for the first time. And in that belly of this beast, if we will, of understanding culture and spirituality and how we're, all us little planets connecting to each other. It's always about that dance of relationship. And so to this gentleman's question and to the question of how you can further it, I would say we are furthering it because there are actual pockets of spiritual cultures that where we had so much controversy in the regular Jewish, and I didn't think like God was not the same thing as spirituality, which was not the same thing with religion. And in Veda they meet, which is because we have that opportunity to connect with everything and everyone, even if we see ourselves as unique part and parcels, and even if we believe in Radha, Krishna, Buddha, Jesus, or whoever is the avatar. So I'm grateful that you are having this conversation because I think in academia, this is one of the most interesting, at least for me, conversations that has come, and I'm always grateful for growing up and loving ethics and religion and studying it at NYU, crazy, but it wasn't the focus. And as I evolved, I just grew up and connected more and more. But academic wise, this is, I think, one of the most expansive, well, you would probably say community, but academic, spiritually connected, that is definitely aware of how culture can get in the way of our spiritual practice. And yet, if we know so much more, we can embody our own practice and then be in relationship to everyone as a soul.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and to that, I would like to, to connect what you just said, Josh. It's so good to have him. She's an amazing yoga teacher and philosopher. And, what you're saying is it's true that often, in academia, there is no space for spirituality because in spirituality, there is the I. There is no way that you can just say, to the third person, like you have to be part of that to experience that. Otherwise, there is no spirituality. The point is that you need to, it's an experience. It's not a mind, it's not a theory. So, it's interesting what you were saying about, the study. That once you study something, the study is there and you're here. And I think I think it's interesting what you're doing with Asian contemplative and transcultural studies master, and you're kind of going beyond that. And now, so how someone, for instance, being part of this master can bring their own experience to, to the conversation, to the study. And, in the 70s, that was disrupted, especially with feminism. Yeah. Now the I was embraced. And of course, you can now write, in the first person. A lot of students ask me that, can I write my paper or my dissertation in the first person? Say, it is a possibility. But it is true that often the idea is that like you're the third person because you're supposed to be objective. So how is the aspect, especially if you're talking about spirituality, there is no spirituality that is just in theory, like you need to experience it. So how can you bring that, the experience of the practitioner, of the student, to the studies itself?
Yeah, this is the what's called the model of the scholar practitioner. And the idea is that, the flip side of it, the negative side of normal academic study is that it's all third personal stuff. It's all abstract, it's universal, it belongs to no one. It belongs to everyone and actually to no one. But the negative side of the first person stuff is narcissism. You can get so easily stuck in thinking you're the center of the universe, right? Forget about anthropocentrism. It's I-centrism, basically. So, I think the real effort is to make the two meet. It's what you're saying is not just saying something from the viewpoint of a narrow I. The I is the all, which is what the question we started with. How does one talk about oneself while keeping in mind the fact that who we take ourselves to be is in relation with the all and actually is porous with the all. So I think that's the real effort of, when we talk about autoethnology, right? Or autohermeneutics. These are ways by which we are trying to contextualize the I within larger frames, the frame of, my cultural upbringing, or the frame of my metaphysical framework, or the frame of my psychological understanding. So the I is never taken for granted. The I is always a question. The who am the I is always forefront in your academic writing. Yeah.
I feel that at the beginning of the I might be like a bridge where I'm telling you where I come from so that we can communicate and not direct like a wall, like what are you saying?
Yeah. Right. That too, yes, exactly. Neela.
So I wanted to comment on this experience we had.
Yeah.
I was also watching your poetic machine here. And simply by embodying, because you invoke Nisargadatta, right? Which is probably Nisargadatta. So it is a return. We see in Western philosophy call it corporeal term, right? But it is the return of Prakriti. So it's separation of Prakriti and Purusha. We talk about all the different kind of humanism, if you will. But the experience of this riding the wave of this amazing music and watching how that sound was playing out, which was creating an amazing mind, right? It's from linear to circle. So it's like the spanda, right? It's like you don't need to get into this mental space at all. But since we have so devalued Right? It seems that there is always a danger of whatever the way we define the thing, even as a soul or something. So this grounded experience actually was fantastic when you see the real world, right? If you don't want to read the world. But the power imbalance that we have here, with the power of the machine, which is so incredible, right? Doesn't matter where you are, you are totally enamored of this. Everybody wants this power machine rather than this, what we just experienced. Because that I, the narcissistic I that needs to be pleased, needs to have stuff, that needs to do all that, which is always by denying prakriti in a way, right? Of not wanting to die, because that's part of the whole thing. So how do you bring this dialogue with this complete, power dynamics is like totally imbalanced.
Yeah, I think that is exactly where we have to, there are critical movements in that direction as well. Even in philosophy, we were discussing it, the whole philosophy of it's called non-philosophy, right? The idea is that, the artist or the musician, the philosophy is immanent. It is immanent within Prakriti itself. Prakriti is its own wisdom. So I think that's what we have to empower in these studies as well, rather than study them from the viewpoint of something which is talking about. It is talking with and talking from that we have to embrace.
Yeah, and I would like to add maybe something. It's interesting, about also the power dynamics and yeah, right now, like what's happening and why all of this is happening. And then one time, some years ago, I was really having the question in my mind, like, how do you deal with all these, power dynamics, and let's call it also injustice and all of that. And then I thought, of someone like the Buddha, who, yeah, he was born in a privileged situation, but then eventually he left, the palace. And at the time, there was so much injustice going on, and so much, talking about power dynamics. If you were the king, you could do anything. If you were not the king, your powers were very limited in that society, And then I thought, someone like him still got his own enlightenment for that era. I can still see, some aspect that do not suit anymore. What does it mean to be Latin right now? He still has some sexist ideas, but still, according to the era, he brought so much to everyone. We are still inspired by the Buddha. And he lived in a society that was completely out of balance, like even more if you think that maybe what's happening right now, like in Woodstock, if you want. So then I thought and also I thought of another teaching of the Buddha who says, it is kind of good if you want to know who you are, to be a human, because, if you think of Buddhist cosmology, there are many dimensions, and some are much, there are gods and goddesses who are not necessarily enlightened. So they have a very easy life. They have very long lives. But because they have such an easy life, when they die, they forget who they are. And then their incarnation is like a much lower realm where there is, violence and, Now, he says, if you're a human, you're in a good position because you have challenges. So you're not in such a, difficult place to be that you're always just trying to survive. But you're not in a situation where everything is so easy going that you think that you are the best one, that you are the goddess, that you are the king, that you are the queen. Now you know that there are challenges, and those challenges are the ones that really allow you to know and to be humble. And so in that sense, I think that going back to the question, why existence is not a smooth ride, why there are constant challenges. And on one side is that, on one side, these challenges allow us to stop, to stop and really understand, like, for instance, the pandemic. I personally, I thought it was one of the most existentially powerful moments of my own existence. And it didn't start easily. I was in New York City. I had friends in China, students in China and family in Italy. And I knew what was happening in those countries. When here the narrative was like, nothing is happening, it's all good. And so I knew how it was going to go. And eventually you start to hear the sirens all day long and people start to die and you understand that it's going to be really bad. And so I didn't start in a very highest way of, I was like, wow, this is going to be, but turned out to be one of the most powerful moments of my life. It gave me the strength to realize that it was time to get out of the city in general. I was ready for change. I was ready to be where there are less humans, because I spent 40 hours of my life around humans. I really want to know who we are. And I did, I understand humans, but they don't know about bears and wolves and snakes and birds and trees. I don't know, because I was born in a city. And I knew already that it was my time to transition. And I liked that in Hinduism, there are different stages, different ashrams of life. And I feel that, that stage was coming, but I was like, wait a second, I'm still enjoying New York City. Wait a second. And the pandemic, boom, it was like, no, like, look, who are you? Who are you? People are dying. You may die tomorrow. You may die right now. And it was so powerful and gave me that power. It's like, there is nothing to wait. There is right now the moment. And so it changed even the way I think of posthumanism, the way I think of teaching changed. Like now, we taught online, now we're back to teach at NYU in classrooms. But it does, to me, it does feel like the past. To me, teaching in a small room with no windows, just in front of the computer, people taking notes, it doesn't feel real anymore. I don't think it's good for the students to be just sitting all day long like this, because it is unhealthy. It's not the way we evolved to be. And we need to be understanding our embodiment. We need to be moving around. The ancient didn't just sit around and learn. They were moving around, and they had, it was a way to exist. It was not just a way to learn, mind to mind. So in that sense, I feel that the challenges are the ones that really allow us, if we go and we are brave enough to understand that there is going to be a treasure at the end of the tunnel. So if we keep going into the tunnel, we not just say, okay, I'm taking some pills to not understand it. If we just stay there and keep going, and eventually, boom, there is a realization. So I feel that, like if everything was perfect and everyone was very happy, and probably this dimension would be finished. There is like in order to manifest, you need the vibration. Once you have like complete harmony, there is no dissonance anymore, and there is stasis, there is death. So that's, there is the good side of looking at it, is that what allows us to understand what is important and what we need to manifest, and also who we are. And again, the pandemic, I thought it was an extraordinary example of that. And I'm not ready to go back. I'm not.
That is, and the virus kills property, right? Virus is also death. So the thing is, the transhuman wants to run away from death, right? So acceptance of death is so vital, right? Not running away from death, because that's the natural rhythm, the rhythm that was captured in this experience.
There's so much more to say, but thank you so much. Should we, and then we go back if there is space about that? That is, yeah.
I can stop thinking about of other bodies who had this kind of experience much earlier, and which are their own generations, right? Native populations or enslaved people and descent after Americans or after Brazilians or after diaspora in a sense. What you described, I cannot still detach from the first question. It is still an experience that is experience and a thought about the human who has the privilege to exist and go through the end of that existential experience. And I think there is, I don't know how Posthumanism is growing in Afro-diasporic communities. That would be an interesting question. But I do know that according to the new movement of Afro-diasporic communities, at least in Brazil, there is a lot of realizing how the embodied knowledge that is ever acknowledged survived and resisted. So for me, I think the question is how resistance and embodied knowledge that have not been acknowledged. And now that actually the Afro-diasporic communities, they claim for an Afrocentric philosophy where actually the Black human body is in the center. And this, again, that's a contrast from what you're saying, that it could expand to say that it's not so Western-centric, but it very, very much like your explanation that it is a construct and at least an exploration of other humanism. But at the same time, just to finalize what
the second part of my question is, when you look for the humans or the humanness in all these traditions and all these histories or cursories, we lack focus on what they bring to the table that we are not trying to see. And so the second question is, how we manage the invisibility of knowledge and experience and bodies through the lenses of the Asian contemplative studies.
Well, at least as far as the second question is concerned, from an academic point of view, it is exactly that, to bring them to the table, to bring these, and I appreciate what you said about Afrocentric. In fact, from this semester, we are teaching that. We're teaching African epistemologies. So, kind of these knowledges have to re-emerge, not just as kind of, abstract, what we were talking about, which is what is going on all over. You have these scholars who are usually Western scholars who are writing books about somebody who wrote something in the 5th century, trying to parse it and take it apart and kind of arguing about what they meant and things like that. And you read that, it makes it, you don't come away with anything from it. You don't come away with any experience from it. So it's really different worldviews, different psychologies, and different practices and different experiences. It's that entire, context that needs to be put forward for people to dwell in. It's an immersion. That's why also this kind of this was an experiment at being able to present these things in forms of immersion, where you can experience it with all your different parts of the being. So that's the way in which I feel academy has to change. And there is an attempt, at least, to open up these types of academic spaces.
Yeah.
Francesca?
There is a lot to say. I'm going to go to Nietzsche first. And so Nietzsche sees 3 stages of the human. And he sees the camel. And the camel is the one who just accepts whatever is there. So for instance, if you live in a racist society, you're going to be racist. If you live in a sexist society, you're going to be sexist. If you're going to be living in a, I don't know, Hindu nationalist society, you're going to be Hindu nationalist. Whatever is there, you're going to just accept it, okay? The camel, though, is also the student, the one who is learning. So you're just learning as well. So there are, the camel can be different stages. From the camel at one point rebels. No longer can bring all this stuff. It's too much, it's too heavy. I don't know if anyone been on the desert, but camels do rebel. It's like, enough, I'm not going to bring any more humans on my back. You're too heavy. So the camels rebel and become the lion. And the lion is the one who is going to be, enough is enough. I want my space of freedom. And so, for instance, I think of, like a lot of movements in the 70s. For instance, like a Black liberation movement and all the gender with all the rainbow of colors, all of that was like, enough is enough. Now, now this is at the center of the discourse. Now it's the Black body, or is the queer body, or is the female body, or is menstruation, something that has never even been addressed in philosophy. But to me, that is still a reaction. Is it very important? In fact, according to Nietzsche, in the metamorphosis of the spirit, you need to be the lion in order to become the child. But the lion cannot create yet, because the lion is too busy protecting their space of freedom. So according to Nietzsche, if you replace, and now they say, okay, enough is enough, you're no longer talking about me, you white Western man, whatever, like, you're not going to, I'm going to talk about myself, which was a lot of, movements that came after the 70s, in many, many different countries. So I'm going to, okay, now I'm going to talk about myself and tell you who I am, because I am the only one who can tell you who I am. You don't know me. I'm not that stereotype people think I was. But again, if we stay within this realm, we are still, is still part of that, is still essentially connected to the fact that I'm replacing. Now there is another centrism. Now maybe it's Afrocentrism, or it's female centrism, or it's queer centrism. According to Nietzsche, to be the child, to be the superhuman, you need to go into the third stage, which is the child who is just running around. It is the child who is playing. The child is the one who is not caught neither in domination nor rebellions. The child is the one who is fully present in the present moment and is aware of the fact that anything can be anything. If I give to the child this bottle, the child is not going to open like I didn't drink water. They're going to play, smell, and then throw it around and go on. Anything can be anything. It's full poiesis. The child can play with existence, full poiesis, fully aware. Now, I would say that this is all very important because we can say that in the at least 2,000 years, the focus of academia, well, academia comes later on if in the traditional sense, but you think in the sense of like, like the history of thought, the history of philosophy has been very male, has been very Western, has been very white, and et cetera, et cetera. But again, it is your call in life. But my call in life is not just to respond to someone who has been trying to categorize me based on some type of embodiment that I am playing with in this dimension, because I am much more than this. I'm not just this end. I am much more than that. And so to me, it was very important, for instance, to understand all the other the plurals, that of the subject. Subject is not one, it's many. It can be female, it can be male, it can be queer, it can be black. It's very important. But to me, if you stay there, you're still limiting yourself to an identity. So to me, the example of the child, or the example of Maharaj, who says, I was never born and never died, that go beyond your embodiments, your identities, your space times. And that to me is the final awareness. Now, it is very important to honor who you also come in the roots of your material, biological embodiments, absolutely. And we should understand that as a species, because if we're learning about the human, and this human is always white and male and hetero, etc., we're not really learning about the human. It's an obfuscation, it's an ignorance, is bad academia. You're teaching the wrong thing. You're not teaching about the species. You're talking about maybe 20% of, not even 5% of the species, if you're really talking about that kind of human. So that's academically wrong. And now we know that. But I would say that if you go to the other side, just, okay, now we are learning about all this subjectivity, is very important, but is that going to bring you to awareness? To me, the answer is no, because you're still limiting yourself to another identity, to another specific identity. So again, it is very important in the stages of the metamorphosis. And this is also a choice. I love to be a rebel. I was a rebel for, I think, at least 10 years of my life. I loved it. I can say it's much fun. It's a punk movement, no future. It's a lot of fun. But then I also saw that it was also linked, and I feel that like if you want to really understand who you are, it's not just an answer, to what has been missing from that tradition or from those cultures. And I feel that it's interesting because if you talk about mysticism coming in all flavors. A lot of these people were women who had no voice in society. A lot of them were slaves. If you think about this little dog who is enjoying so much themselves. You're the one having more fun than anyone, I can see that. But I would say that no one can limit your awareness. Like the best books have been written in prison. Think of Martin Luther King, a letter from Birmingham jail. And some of the best books have been written. No one can imprison your own understanding of who you are, So I would say it is very important to maybe avoid, to go into those kind of situations. But I feel that even if you find yourself there, no one can limit your awareness. And when I first came here, I was, hanging out a lot in New York and had a lot of friends from many different communities. A lot of these people who were, very aware and, and spiritually very advanced. They were not academic. They were not academic people. They were not white. They were like black. They were like doing something completely other than just talking about it. And they were doing different practices. They were very aware, and they came from real histories of slavery, because they also told me some other Black American maybe come from country in Africa and they were not enslaved, but we were. So I don't think that your conditions are going to limit your awareness. And actually, maybe sometimes think of someone like Rabia in the Sufi tradition. She was incredible mystic. She was a slave, apparently maybe even a sex slave, and she eventually found herself. So there is no way to stop that awareness. It doesn't matter, you know. So again, it depends on where level you're going to be. So that's very important. But I would say, you know, like it can also be a limit, just going to the other side of the coin, you know, and just now changing the centrism. And the center is everywhere.
We have to close today because there's another event coming very soon. So thank you everybody for coming along. And
Muffin, maybe if you want to show, because there was
yes,
the
yes.
okay. If
The boss, so I have to leave for the boss.
yeah,
But I can share it via email.
Yes, yes.
perfect.
Also, there are these brochures. If anybody is interested in a brochure, Judy will give them to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, guys.